Hello listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of the Cult Vault. This week we are revisiting a group that we have covered before, but bringing a fresh perspective. Before then, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to my newest patron and supporter of the podcast, Shelby. Thank you so much for signing up to the Patreon, and I really hope that you enjoy the exclusive content that you find there. Here is Troy. So hi Troy, and welcome to the show. Today we're going to be continuing some coverage of something that I have previously explored on this show, and that is something called Straightway, which has gone by many other different names, which we can discuss a little further on in the episode. But would you like to start by introducing yourself to the listeners?
Yeah, my name's Troy Yurchek. I'm 37 years old, about to be 38. I spent time at Straightway from 89 to 2005, 2006 when I joined the Navy. So that would be the extent of the time I was there. I was probably 6 years old when I got there, and 20 something when I left. So currently I'm working in the professional field and lab analytics. So enjoy the sciences, and I guess that's about as much personal stuff that's not tied to our discussion. So
Yeah, I think that's a great introduction. You've given us some key facts there that we can definitely go back and look at, and I'm curious to know how you go from the Navy to lab analytics. So I'll look forward to asking you those questions later
that's a
on
good
as
question.
well, especially as we work through your timeline. But let's start by just telling the listeners, what, for those that didn't listen to my episode with Stefan a few months back, what is Straightway?
Okay, the way that it's presented is that it is a drug rehabilitation center for people with life-controlling issues. It grew out of Teen Challenge. That's what it originally started as. And the heart of the past originally, or the leader, was to be able to afford the same ministry to families that Teen Challenge only offered to single individuals, or forced families to split to be able to minister to their life-controlling issues. So that's the original way it started. And I think that not having the oversight of Teen Challenge, and even though I know that there's some stuff out there about Teen Challenge being kind of cultish as is, without having that oversight from I believe it's the Assembly of God, things started going downhill. So that's that would be, I guess, the original thought and idea of it was that it was a drug rehabilitation center that was isolated from society, far enough away that the temptations of whatever life-controlling issues they had were not in their face at all times. Which those ideas are all good ideas. It's just without good oversight, without some control, you can bend the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you've just linked so much of the content I've already done on this show to numerous other things. So I've done a lot of extensive coverage on the troubled teen industry, which does include Teen Challenge within its framework. So in some ways, I'm guessing that if Straightway is based on the framework of Teen Challenge, then Straightway itself most likely fits into the troubled teen industry in some respect, even though I know that it's families that were living in Straightway as opposed to young children, young adults being sent away to therapeutic wilderness programs.
I think it was, if I can remember correctly, the majority of people that came there when they first came there were maybe not in the teen, but young adult era age group. So, somewhere between 18, I don't think they let anybody in before 18 without some serious parental consents. And I knew a few of them, some seriously troubled teens that went through the program. Actually, I went through as a teenager, not because of life controlling issues, but that's a question for a little bit further down in the timeline. but most of the people that came there, because it was so unique in that it accepted whole families, you had a lot of, 18 to just under 30 something coming there, young kids, young families that were realizing they may not have been equipped to have and run a family with the issues that they were dealing with. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was definitely, you could definitely see maybe the same format and the same draw as it was for Teen Challenge to reach out to troubled
Mm-hmm.
teens, where
Mm-hmm.
parents don't know what to do with the kid, and we're just trying to find something. Maybe they just need to be isolated for a while, send them to Teen Challenge. There was a lot of very similar attitudes when it came to Straightway, which when we came, oh man, yeah, lots of different names. It was Lifeway, and then it switched over to Straightway, and now I guess Restoration City. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because a lot of the troubled teen industry appears to be based on Charles E. Dederick's Synanon, which was a drug rehabilitation program that grew into a commune that used cult-like methods of control. And from that, things like Cedu were born, which just seem to be black and white replicas of Synanon, but for young adults. So it's almost like this framework has gone full circle, because now we're back at somewhere that presents itself as a drug rehabilitation program. Apart from with Straightway, you mentioned the Assembly of God, so I'm guessing there's Pentecostal Christian values and
Oh
beliefs
yeah.
and practices that are brought into Straightway. So that would be what makes it different from the likes of Synanon. So
Yep.
you arrived here at 6 years old. So this is not something you're born into. So is it you and your parents arrive? How did you end up there?
All right. So a little bit of, okay, let's do my story. I'm from Michigan, Kalamazoo area. My dad is my stepdad. Well, he adopted me, so he's my adopted father.
Mm-hmm.
Had some anger issues, and my mom gave him an ultimatum that you either need to fix that or this is over. And I remember as a child, running to YMCA and staying there a couple nights with my younger brother and my mom. Um, Vivid memories of sleeping on a couch in the middle of a gymnasium and some strange stuff like that, just because of some of the abuse that was going on. And my dad took that ultimatum seriously, joined a teen challenge up there. I don't know where it was. At this point, you got to remember I was 4 or 5. So
Mm-hmm.
I remember visiting him a couple times at a teen challenge. And while he was there, he heard about the teen challenge, because at that point it was still part of teen challenge, the teen challenge down here that actually took in whole families.
Okay.
So he came down to Texas by himself to get his foot in the door so that we could come and join as a family. And we came down in '89, and my mom started the program as well. Not that she had a life controlling issue, but that was um, part of the process, was that even if she didn't have any life controlling issues, as a family, we were going to go through the program as a whole. So my dad was maybe 3 to 6 months ahead of her in, I believe it was an 18-month program at the time. And the first 6 months, if I remember correctly, they were separated. My dad stayed in the men's dorm. My mom stayed with the single moms in the single moms area. And then it's a big deal that they've reached a point in the program that they could be reunited. And then we got our own small apartment, and then there's some steps that go from there.
Mm-hmm. So is it just you at this point, or are there any brothers and sisters?
I had my half brother from my adopted dad at this point, and it's a little awkward for me to call him a half brother. My dad's my dad, and my brothers and now brothers and now sister are all. We don't really see me as a separate individual in
Mm-hmm.
the family. So the family unit has is really healthy now. Anyway, so if I make it seem a little odd and I just say my sister or my brothers or my dad, recognize that it's my adopted father. So because sorry, what was the question again?
No. I think we covered it. So there's you and your brother and your mom and dad, and you travel to Texas to join Straightway. And do you how have you done this? You know you're going for at least 18 months. Do you pack up the car and just take like the essentials, or how did that work?
Well, given that they were so young at the time, I think my dad was, let's see if I can remember correctly. My mom was probably 25, 26. My dad was 27, 28. We didn't have much. Before we came there, we had been staying with my grandparents on my mom's side. And so we didn't really have much to bring down there. So you packed up what you needed, clothes, practically. They provided bedding and housing and food. And it wasn't until you get into the second half of the program where you're given a lot more freedom that we actually had my grandfather, who happens to be a trucker, we packed up everything from Michigan and actually brought it down here for a longer stay than we originally anticipated. My dad didn't want to stay in Texas. I think my mom had some qualms about how well the program actually worked and tried to keep us connected there because she found that it was there was some external control that kept my dad under control.
Right. Okay.
Via that way.
Okay. So do your parents, do they have religious ties before they decide to make this move, or is it just something that your dad is seeing kind of as a last resort to help you and your family get out of this struggle?
We've, as far as I can ever remember, we've always been I don't like the word religious, but we've always been attached to Christianity in some shape or form, as far as I can remember. Now, I know on one side of the family is Catholic, the other side, I believe, is Baptist, I think. So we've always had the church. I remember growing up, or the few years that I can remember in Michigan, we were faithful attenders to a church up there. I believe it was Baptist. My mom was a part of the worship team, being one of the singers, and my dad wasn't. I think my dad was more involved with the youth at that point. He helped with Royal Rangers, so I don't know if Royal Rangers is Baptist or not. So I could be wrong about whether or not it's Baptist, but Royal Rangers is a Christian version, or a more Christian version of Boy Scouts. So
okay.
So they were involved in the church the whole time, and I think that may have been where, when they reached out for help, and I'm not privy to how they got connected with Teen Challenge or anything like that, but that's why it was a faith-based organization that we chose, was because we didn't believe at the time, we didn't believe that the issues could be solved by pure psychology, I guess.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, that there needed to be a faith element involved.
And I mean, from the way you've kind of portrayed it here, at first glance, you're going to a place where they're going to give you shelter and bedding and food, and you're going to have your parents enroll in this 18-month program, which is supposed to rehabilitate and repair and heal. So on the surface, it sounds ideal, like it's going to do the trick. It's going to really help, to fix.
And that's why it's still alive today, is because it does have that. Well, this seems all above ground. It seems all like the motivations are all good. Not to use that old turn of phrase, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You can see all the good intentions, the rules, the structure, everything. And I've even talked with some people that went through the program multiple times but left right after they were done with the program, that they never saw the underbelly that Stefan was talking about, or that we'll
Right.
probably be talking about. And they were like, it was good for us. It was good for me. I had alcoholism as a controlling issue. And this is somebody that I'm very close to, was a mentor of mine when I was there. She had alcoholic problems, and whenever that issue became so controlling in her life, she would come back through the program. And I think she went through 4 times. And
Wow.
she found it as an oasis to actually take a break from herself, or the things that were controlling her, and be separated from them enough to recover and be motivated again to be on the, I guess, the straight and narrow and stay away from alcohol. But it never had a permanent effect until, and for her, it was something outside the program that actually had that permanent effect. So.
Wow, that must have been quite an experience for her as well, after going through the program a number of times, to then have an
Mm-hmm.
experience outside of the program, which solidifies a permanent end to that problem.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay, so you arrive here at 6 years old. Do you
Mm-hmm.
remember your first impressions of what it looked like when you got there, and the people that you met?
Yeah. First impressions, I wouldn't have any. I wouldn't have anything to relate it to. Um, it was a full campus, gymnasium, a cafeteria. It was real big on family. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner were all served in a like cafeteria style, where you go through the line, you get your food, everybody eats together. You know, throughout the meal, people would start clapping, just like to show appreciation for the cooks and the work that they've done. It was really close knit, and there was a bunch of kids my age. I think when I went through, I mean, I could probably name quite a few. I'm not going to name them, but there was at least 20 or 30 kids my age, or within a year above and below my age, when we first got there, and the place was packed. So you had a huge community of people that spent a lot of time together, and it was definitely a close-knit community. So that's my first impression. It was a good thing. Now the weather was horrible. I wasn't used to having to hydrate as much, but it was hot. I remember having headaches from being dehydrated a couple times, just from playing so hard with a bunch of kids.
And I imagine having to probably wear excessive sun cream as well.
I don't know if we did that. I know I started wearing hats a lot more, but I don't remember having to put sunscreen on unless we went to the beaches, which there was a couple within driving distance that they would do as a whole community every once in a while, that they would just go to the Gulf of Mexico and have a barbecue and stuff.
So even that sounds great, having all this space and freedom as a child to run around with all the other children and have fun and play. And at 6 years old, sometimes the sunny days, even though they're hard to get through, the sun seems to stay up forever, and the days last such a long time, and you really get the most out of that kind of really warm summertime.
Yep.
And what was education like for you? Did you enroll in a public school?
My mom homeschooled me. There was a when we first got there, homeschooling was, I guess, the rage, and was recommended. And my mom started me in kindergarten. I actually homeschooled 1st through 12th grade. I'm the only one in my family to have done that.
Okay.
Everyone else ended up going to either private or public school, or a mixture of both. I had the option of going to public high school, but they didn't believe that I had been homeschooled, so they made me take the college entrance exam at 8th grade, and I scored high enough to get into college. And they were like, "Oh, I guess we're going to put you in all honors classes." And I was like, if I'm training myself, because practically at that point, I think my mom did 1st and 2nd grade, was more involved there. a little bit in fifth grade when we did it as a fourth and fifth grade when we did it as a community of homeschooling. But for the most part, it was, here's the books. If there's videos, you do it. And I just trained myself. And so I was like, if I'm doing this well in eighth grade that I can get into college, might as well just continue. So I finished. I wish I would have went to public school. I was, being a 13, 14-year-old making that decision. I look back and wish I would have went to public school. But other than that, homeschool seemed to be, when I was a child, seemed to be the focal point. They even had part of the campus designed into like small cubicles for parents and kids to homeschool their kids in a general area. So it was actually really, they made it quite easy to homeschool for the parents.
Okay. And what did the average day and week look like for you here whilst you're growing up? Is it sort of a lot of faith-based activities, or is it a lot of homeschooling and not really a lot to do with the program, the therapeutic side of it that your parents are involved in?
I would say the latter is a little bit better. The structure for homeschooling was kind of ad hoc, whatever parents chose to do with their kids.
Okay,
Some did it in their own homes. Some took advantage of the space that was available to do it. There wasn't really that much structure. And other than being required to go to chapels on Wednesday mornings and encouraged to go to men's prayer at 6 o'clock in the morning, which is something that, dads were encouraged to bring their young children to, and churches on Sunday. The structure when it came to Bible was not as, or the faith-based stuff was not as forced on the kids at that time. Now I remember in kindergarten they did have a kindergarten teacher that taught kindergarten. And I was probably one of the most rambunctious ADHD kids in her class. I gave her a lot of hell. Maybe that's why my mom decided to do homeschooling, so that I didn't do well with others.
She wanted to keep you away from everybody else, stop you from causing trouble.
I don't know if that was her motivation, but I can think back in some of my memories of being one of the kids that gave the kindergarten teacher a
run for her money.
Yeah.
And when you talk about these Wednesday services and these morning services for the males of the group, are these led by one person in particular, or is it sort of shared ownership of the services?
Well, the chapels were for everybody. The men's prayer at 6 o'clock in the morning, they did have, they had a perspective on the way that church should be run. They tried to be accurate to the Bible to a point, was that it was supposed to be a communal thing. And so prayer at 6 o'clock in the morning for men before they would go to work or whatever, it was supposed to be communal. So yeah, maybe somebody would start the prayer. There was maybe 15, 20 minutes of kind of personal meditation or prayer going on at the beginning, and then someone would start, and then someone else would say a prayer, and we would agree as the community with that prayer, or and for an hour or 45 minutes of that hour was spent, people taking turns praying for the community, or praying for the government, or praying for God's will, or praying for God's revelation, or praying for blessing, or I mean, because there was needs in the community when you've got hundreds of people living in a small community, and it was there was needs, food needs. I remember one of the things that I remember was that we lived off of a lot of charity when it came to food. There was food pantries that would give us their, 1 day outdated bread, and there was one time, I think it was an entire summer, that we had buckets of pimento cheese that we had pimento cheese sandwiches forever. And I still to this day, pimento cheese kind of makes me sick. But that was, so there was times that there was prayers like, hey, we need eggs. So let's pray that the eggs come in. And so there was this, prayer time and answer. I mean, even as a child, I remember hearing prayer requests being expressed in that community setting. And then within a week or so, or days even, truckloads of bread show up, or hey, we made too much bread for demand and we have to get rid of it. Here's a truckload of bread. And so you could see the prayer requests being answered in that regard. And it fed into, this is the right place. This is a good place. Right. So,
yeah. And is there like a pastor or an elder or a church leader who stands sort of as the figurehead of Straightway?
Yes. David Kurschke was definitely the figurehead, especially when we were growing up, as the pioneer for not only the theological messaging and teaching at the church, but also the pioneer of the idea that we could do this for families. That Teen Challenge had up to this point only offered to single individuals, or required those individuals to give up significant others and children while they were in the program.
And David Kurschke is, I'm guessing, very faith-based himself, extremely religious, and practices his Pentecostal belief system.
Yeah, he was. He comes from a long line of pastors. He was trying to choose my words properly. He was the rebel when it came to his family. I believe he comes from a fairly large family, and he was the rebel son. His dad was the right-hand man to David Wilkerson. I don't know if I think it's the cross and the switchblade, big deal in New York, that area. He was his youth pastor. So David Kurschke's dad was the youth pastor for David Wilkerson.
Wow. Okay.
So they're pretty well-to-do, well involved in a lot of big name things. And David Kurschke kind of rejected that at first, and was a composer. I think he was about to sign a contract with CBS for composing for their TV shows. I mean, he's an excellent, or was an excellent musician. And he said he got a calling out of his rebellion to become a pastor that does this. So yeah, there was a lot of, at first it was, he expressed, I've made the sacrifices to do this, and this is what God's called me to, and this is what my focus is. And there seemed to be that solidarity with everybody, that recognizing he could have been doing something else, but chose to be this. And that same story was repeated with his daughter, who, I mean, at 10 years old, she had an album. She's classically trained pianist.
Wow.
And instead of being a performer, and she had the voice for it, the vocals, oh my gosh, she had a soulful voice, incredible. Instead of pursuing that career, she was the praise and worship leader. And that got reiterated. Maybe in my memory, it's a whole lot more than it actually was, but that was something that was brought up multiple times, that we could have been something else, but we chose to serve you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there was that culmination of everything going to that point, that family, that group of leaders.
And was that reflected on the way that David and his family lived as well on the compound? Because you mentioned that eventually you get some permanent accommodation where you can be reunited with your family, where you can all sort of get back together and live as one unit again. So I'm guessing that David and his family, that those sorts of things don't apply to them.
No. Yeah, you're right. But that was because he was never he never went through the program. He was the director of it and the pastor, and so there was never that. There was always a little bit of not a little bit. There was a pretty large separation between David and his family and the rest of everyone else that was there. I think Stefan
Okay.
had highlighted that a little bit as well, that even
Mm-hmm.
though his dad may have been the right hand to David Kirschke, there was still that separation and isolation from the family of the Kirschkes. So now I was friends with his oldest son, and still friends with his oldest son. Definitely estranged from the family, but that's a whole nother story. So,
Mm-hmm.
And getting to see some of that inside because I was friends with David Kirschke's son. You got to see some of the elite, the wealth that they lived in compared to everybody else. Now they still lived in a trailer. They lived in a trailer for a long time, but trips to Europe almost every year, and having the nicest things, always having the biggest TV and the nicest clothes and the nicest furniture, and when the rest of us were living off of handouts. There was a part at the center where people would deliver what is it called, like clothes and shoes and things like that. They call it the breezeway, where every once in a while they would just drop off bags and bags of clothes, and we would get to go through and pick out clothes. That's what we had to deal with, where they were always wearing the name brands and the nicest clothes and the nicest style.
Right.
So there was definitely, they were benefiting, and I think it got worse and worse and worse as the further they got away from their connections with the Assemblies of God and Teen Challenge.
Right. And do you think that they would ever be having to pray for eggs and bread and things like that themselves, or do you feel like they were always in a more comfortable position with things like food and supplies?
Well, I don't think they ever went without. They definitely, I mean, Stefan talked about how the cafeteria, one of the things that students were encouraged to do was to be runners for the food and be able to take trays to the staff houses. They always got food from us. So if there was food, they got it. But there's not often in my interactions with David Kirschke's son did I see that they needed to rely on that. So, but yeah, when you're talking about, I think there was 7 or 8 kids total, so nine people in the house. I don't think they ever went without if there wasn't food, and I don't remember ever going out without food ever at there. Like there was always a steady stream of gifts and things coming in to help. I mean, there was needs that we prayed for when we were running low, but that didn't mean that we went without food.
Yeah. And I just thought it'd be interesting to highlight the differences between David and his way of life compared to the people that are not necessarily his followers, but followers of his vision and his message. All with the same sort of goal in mind, and people who were going through the rehabilitation program built the family a house. Is that right?
Yep, that was probably early 2000s. I don't know if the house was finished when I left, so probably 2005. Right. 2006 was when it was finished. So years before that, they had just been living in a duplex of trailers. I think it was a double wide and a single wide attached to each other with some outgrowth buildings on it. So yeah, I mean, eventually that's where it got to, and like I said, the further away they got that David got from having any oversight is it was like slowly taking more and more from the income that having students there and churches paying for students and parents paying for students. I think more and more of the fraction of money that came in was going specifically to David. You could see that in with the building of the house. That was actually a first fruits. I don't know if Stefan talked about that, or I think he mentioned it once. But there was this teaching that came in that, you want to dedicate the first of your harvest and God will bless the rest. And what we want to do is bless our pastor. So our first fruits this year is going to be building him a house. And this there was not very many people making a lot of money, but they gave so much over an abundance that there was a few people that like had their own businesses. We had landscaping company, people that owned landscaping companies and things like that. But we raised enough money to build them a house where people were living in dormitories that were leaky and we had to be patching them and doing all our own work to patch them. And yeah, so you could definitely see the progress towards being him taking advantage of being the person in charge.
Yeah. And when you speak about these dormitories, is this where you're situated when you first arrive?
Yeah. Actually, the dormitories that we started in, I think we were some of the last people to live in them because of degradation of the facility.
Wow.
So they actually became storage for trash, practically. I mean, just, people would give us rolls of carpet because they had just, refurbished some city government building and they would just give us carpet. And so instead of they didn't need the housing anymore because the number of people had went down, they just started using it for storage for all these gifts and things that, or older stuff that was being given to the center. So yeah, I think the largest housing was literally a 2-bedroom and a bathroom was the largest housing. So if you had 5 kids, you had 5 kids and 2 adults living in a 2-bedroom with a bathroom.
Wow.
Yeah. So for the most part, if you were a single person, you were in a community dorm with community showers. Now things may have changed. I know that they had a pretty well-known, and I'm not using the name because that ministry has requested that their name not be brought up in their support.
Okay.
Because I think that they made a commitment and then heard a lot of pushback from people that had come from there, decided to finish the job and then say, don't mention us.
Yeah.
A ministry actually refurbished the place in the last couple of years, and I think that's why they changed part of the reason why they changed their name. A new face, a new name.
Yeah, and then just hoping that anybody that Googles the new name will have none of the bad press associated with it from the types of things that we're discussing today.
Yeah.
So your parents you've moved and they've enrolled in this 18-month program. It's my understanding from what Stefan said that the program itself is mostly made up of things like manual labor and jobs around the compound. So it's not actually like attend these workshops on these days. It's more of a kind of...
That would be an outside perspective. Given that I went through the program, I have a little bit different perspective on it. The reason I went through the program, and I'll give that little bit of background. I was a teenager. This is after the 8th grade high school thing that I talked about a little bit earlier. I saw students come out of the program that, had just come off the streets, weren't churched, but they understood their faith a lot better than I did. And I've been there since I was 6. And I was like, the difference is not, we both go to the same church. We both go to the same prayer things. We both go to the same chapel. Why is it that and I was interested in my faith. Why is it that I don't know what they know, or I don't have the understanding of my faith that they have? And the only thing I could think of was going through the program. So in the AM before noon, it was classes. So it was college level classes of theology and church history and um, a bunch of different things like that. So they would go through all that. That was in the AM every day. And then in the afternoon was work. So that's when they would start doing, yard keeping and all maintenance of the grounds and everything else like that. And then in the evenings, the students were actually required a certain amount of study period. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think it was about an hour to 2 hours. If you had some demerits on you, it was longer. But and you had required readings. You had to read through the Bible in a year, and you had a library worth of books that you were required to read. Some of them you read in whole, and some of them it was specific parts of the books. And they had their own printing press, so some books were pretty old and out of print that they would print themselves, but they would selectively edit some of the books that they printed.
Wow,
so that
okay.
you weren't getting the full message of Francis Schaeffer or Watchman Nee or some of these writers that were from the early 1900s or late 1800s. I think Francis Schaeffer was late 1800s. And they
That's
would have
a bit sneaky, isn't it?
Yeah, and when you have most people that are unchurched coming, they don't know any better.
No.
I noticed it when I went through the program that I'm going, why am I only allowed to read these 3 chapters? And I'm not supposed to read these other chapters. And then the books would get smaller, and so there were some strange things going on there. But yeah, it was definitely selective. And I think it came down to is what was the message that still gave them a theological basis, but highlighted the need for human spiritual authority for their walk. And that's I remember a lot of I mean, that's what Watchman Nee's book Spiritual Authority was used pretty intensively. Like if you did something wrong or had done something rebellious in their terms, you were required to reread and do a book report on Watchman Nee's Spiritual Authority, which was I don't know if you've ever heard of the term shepherding movement. It's Derek Prince and some other early 50s, 60s movement in the church where the pastor or the leader of a church has ultimate authority, and that even if they're wrong, you are required to obey, and that God will protect you because that's the leader telling you to do it. But it doesn't matter what the leader tells you to do, you must obey.
Right, okay.
Judgment directly from God if you don't obey him.
So you're working your way through this program yourself, and it seems to be made up of, there are things like menial jobs and manual labor that take part in the daytime, but then you're doing extensive research and learning and educating yourself around your faith and other things in the evening times as well. And that's basically what makes up the rehabilitation program for people that come to Straightway and get involved.
Yes.
And
go ahead.
And people are rehabilitating themselves from, you mentioned alcoholism. So I'm guessing are there things like potentially drug abusers.
That seems to be one of their focal points, is that they say, in the past, however many years, when I was there, it was 20 something. Now it's in the 30s or 40s something. However many years we've been doing this, God has blessed us that not a single person has ever gone through withdrawals, and everybody goes through cold turkey. Now, if you ask anybody from there that has been involved, everyone has witnessed somebody going through withdrawals. It's just that they ignore it.
Okay.
And they say, oh, no, we just don't have any. It's no one's been reported to the hospital. No one's been given anything. They've just gone cold turkey.
Right.
And when they're going through it, we isolate them so no one sees it.
Yeah. And then, I mean, with the Pentecostal side of the belief system as well, there's the chance that somebody might need to have a demon cast out of them, from what I understand about Pentecostalism
Yep.
and that belief system. So somebody who is in withdrawal from drugs could be mistaken from needing to have sort of almost like an exorcism, which is
I was
terrifying.
Yeah, it is extremely terrifying. I was pretty sheltered in regards to seeing that. Most of when I went through the program, there was maybe 10, 15 guys at the most. So it's definitely not in its heyday. Where when my dad went through, there was like 78 guys.
Wow. Okay.
So, I mean, you can definitely see the degradation, and a lot of it came from when my parents went through, it was still tied to Teen Challenge. So it was an experiment, but it was tied to Teen Challenge. And then eventually they were like, look, you can't do this. There's too many places for abuse of power and too many places for men and women being on the same campus that do deal with life controlling issues. In close proximity where you can't have eyes on them all the time, and there's going to be some things that are wrong. And David outright rejected it and isolated himself from Teen Challenge, and that's where, and I believe that was in either 89, 90, 91 area. So.
And you mentioned that your parents enrolled in the 18-month program, but there was a point where you got your belongings from home brought to the place you thought you weren't going to be staying for too long. So right. Do you remember how that happened? What part of the program they were in when?
It was probably 12 months, and they called it re-entry. It's the last 6 months or last 3 months of the program where at that point we called it the center back then. This is how much hubris we had. They called it the center. They were making enough money that they actually rented out an entire apartment complex in the adjacent town. Right. And so people that had reached that point would actually go live at these apartment complexes, get a job in the area, and pay rent back to Straightway or
right.
Lifeway to try to teach them life skills. And like I said, there was a lot of good then. By the time I was a teenager, by the time I was a teenager, they no longer had the apartments. They no longer had that reentry program. People that were in reentry either had to get their own apartment somewhere else, or, which was rare, or they just stayed in the student dorms. And so they didn't have that step towards independence anymore. It was as if the walls had enclosed a little bit, and they were trying to keep more control. And you saw that with people that would have to go through the program multiple times, which I just think is, if what you say is as good as you say it is, then one time should give them the skills and the tools to be successful in overcoming their life controlling issues.
Yeah.
If they have to continue to go through the program, that means you're not actually dealing with their life controlling issues. You're sheltering them from them, maybe, or you're creating a new dependence on you. And you can see that in the theology.
Yep. Absolutely. And that was my thought when you mentioned, your friend that had to enroll in the program 4 times or so. The efficacy obviously isn't there if you have to keep returning. And she described it as an oasis, which there gives you sort of that dependency that you were just talking about, which is definitely interesting. So you move into these apartment buildings. And what when the apartment buildings disappear, do you ever end up living in a trailer on the compound, on the property?
Yep, my parents. Okay, so shortly after they had lived in the apartments, my parents. Uh, this is part of the control, is that they would talk to the elders at the location and request wisdom. There's wisdom in a multitude of counsel. That's the scripture that they would use for it, and that you need to talk to the elders, and it's better to have all of the elders have input in life decisions than it is for you to try to do this independently. And so my parents talked to the elders, and they agreed. My parents bought a house in that adjacent town, and we lived there for probably four, if I can remember correctly, probably about 4 years, and we had single parents. We had an extra room, and so we made room for single parents to come live with us during that period of time. And I think we had, if I remember correctly, 3 different groups of single moms live with us at the time. I'm not going to use their names, but they, and it was a good thing. It was like, the inner step. Okay, after that point, and I don't know if it was my dad got laid off and couldn't afford the house payments anymore. At that point, I was 10, maybe 11 years old, 12 maybe, and I wasn't really concerned at that point. So I don't remember exactly why, but we ended up selling the house and purchasing a double wide and having it moved out to the center, and we lived there until I left. No, not until I left for the Navy. Until I graduated high school. And when we graduated high school, my parents purchased another home in the adjacent town. Once again, my dad didn't want to stay. My mom was the one that kept us there for a long time. So yeah, we moved to a trailer on campus.
Mm-hmm. And do you think this kind of move to a more permanent housing situation as it kind of bolsters your mum's belief that it's important to be as involved as possible in the sort of everyday life of living on the grounds?
Yeah, I think when we had the first house in the adjacent town, my dad's abusive tendencies came out again, which obviously meant the program didn't work. But instead of being directed at my mom, which is what it was before, it was directed at us. And there's actually a story earlier in the timeline that we should probably talk about, because it leads up to this. The elders actually turned my dad's anger away from my mom towards the kids.
Right. Okay.
So when I was there, probably 6 months to a year, one of the kids my age, like I said, there was a whole bunch of them. One of the ones that was my age invited me over to stay the night, and he had an older teenage, well, I don't know if he was teenage, probably 12, 13, preteen or teen, older brother. And so, we watched Disney movies, which we were allowed to watch then, some of them. There was a lot of ones that were on the blacklist, but
right.
Watched a movie. I don't remember what movie it was. And they had a single wide, and they had, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 kids. And so all the boys stayed in one room. Well, we were on the floor, and the teenage boy forced me and his younger brother to perform fellatio on him. Said it was the cool, it was what all the cool kids did. And I don't remember going to sleep. I don't remember anyways. So that happened. A couple days later, I'm taking a bath in the small apartment. This is after my parents got back together, and they're in a small apartment next to the chapel. And I'm in the bath, and I'm bawling, and I still remember the sick feeling inside of just being dirty. infected. I don't know how else to describe it. My mom came in and like, why are you crying? I was like, I just feel dirty inside. And she goes, why do you feel dirty? And I was like, because of all my sins. So, I mean, at 6, maybe, uh,
Oh.
I I recognized what I had been learning and recognized that there was something broken and sick. And so I told her everything. Now, I was a pretty rambunctious kid. I'd gotten in trouble for ripping a girl's doll in half, and I had to vacuum the stairways and the gymnasium, which was carpeted, for a couple weeks to like earn the $10-15 to replace her doll. But that was the type. I was a rambunctious kid, but I just confessed everything to my mom, including what had happened the couple days before, and she was appalled. So she told my dad and told the elders, and the I'm not using their names. Because I'm not angry. I'm not bitter at that teenage boy, because I think that when you live in such a domineering society, you find ways of dominating someone else.
Right.
And I think that's what that came from. So yeah, he
Okay.
may have been a kid then, and I got to remember that was a kid then, and I was a kid then. So I'm not angry at them. Anyways, so that's why I'm keeping that family name out of it.
Okay.
But what came back was because the way that the teenage boy turned the story was that because I'm the one that performed it, I was the one that had the idea.
Oh my goodness.
So the elders made a decision that, with the Proverbs that says, wickedness is bound up in the heart of a child, and the rod of correction will drive it far from him, and that wounds that bruise deep cast away sin. Some of these pretty horrendous scriptures that I think are abused and taken out of context, specifically, something that was written 3,500 years ago in a completely different society being used in a new society. It's just wrong. They said that it was my fault and I needed to be beaten until it was removed. And so my mom not agreeing with it, there was an elder that up until recently I didn't know was involved. My memory wasn't there for it. Made my mom leave the room and made my dad beat me until he said it was enough. And having spankings, I mean, it was part of growing up then. My dad didn't let us scream, and so we were allowed to cry, but not scream.
Right.
And so one of the ways that we dealt with having a spanking was that I learned to count, to keep my mind active so that I wasn't screaming.
Okay.
I lost count around 50 when my legs gave out, and
gosh.
continued to keep going because the elder told him to.
Oh.
So that, and I remember not wanting to walk and not wanting to be around, and that was probably the worst beating. That wasn't a spanking. That was the worst beating that I got, but that didn't stop with me. The same elder did the same thing to force my dad to beat him from my dad's account, over 10 minutes with a 1x4 until the 1x4 broke on my brother. And
oh my gosh.
That's when the elder told him, okay, that's enough. Because my brother was rambunctious and ADHD like I was. And that's how they dealt with kids. And so, that my dad's anger wasn't changed. My dad's anger was refocused on us.
Yeah.
And so that started showing up when we lived in the adjacent town. And I think my mom, maybe that's what it was, that between whether it was my dad's job or something else, but that it was, no, we need to be closer so that there's more control. And there was multiple times where my dad's anger would come out, and my mom would call the elders over to control my dad. So that may have been more of the motivation, or at least the concern as to why my parents decided to move back onto campus. Was for that control.
I just those things that happen, Troy. I don't even. How do you even justify? This is what gets me with things like scripture. You can't use it to justify abusing and injuring children, tiny children. You can't. And I keep hearing more and more stories of people who said we got the paddle, or we were put in a dark room, and as children, because the scripture was used to justify that being done to us. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't understand how somebody can say that they're doing these things to bring you closer to God or to keep you pure when you're just tiny. And of course you're going to be rambunctious. You're a child. You should be, you know. We can see your tiny little ones running around. And that's how kids should be. Kids should be allowed to run around and be cheeky and not have these things done to them. And the fact that you went through this experience with this other teen boy and managed to speak to your mum about it, when a lot of children are so confused by things like that they don't speak about them, for it to then have this horrible negative effect on you in the first place is like, I can't imagine how traumatizing that must be, to not only have that experience in the first place, but then to be punished for having it forced on you as well. So I just don't. So as we said, on the surface, this place sounds like it has all the answers, but then there are people in these positions of power that use those positions to inflict pain and abuse on tiny children. That's just awful.
Yeah, what's really creepy is that I don't have a memory of who the elder was. My parents were the actual ones that informed me about it, but he was one of the Bible teachers for the college level courses during the mornings, and he was one of my favorite Bible teachers there. And I looked up to him, even to the point where when I got out of the Navy, I had completely separated myself from there. I went and visited him and his wife. His wife, who recently passed away, is one of the biggest hearts. Oh my gosh, she was so incredibly beautiful, joyous, loving human being that ever existed. And you talk to anybody that's been there, they will know her name just by the description of what I just said. She was a mother to every child there. And I went and visited them, and because I'm a an amateur theologian, and I really do take my faith seriously today. But I went to them to tell them, thank you for what you've given to me, because through the Navy and through everything and through all the hell, you're one of the reasons I pursued my faith the way that I pursued my faith, and found myself back in the faith when I had stumbled out of it during my time in the military. And then hearing that the two greatest abuses that are in my memory of my brother and I were directed personally by that person was a scar that took me. Maybe I'm not completely done dealing with it. That took my breath away. It was that how could so much good and so much evil come out of the same person? And yeah, so now there's that story. So I don't know where that fits in our discussion or timeline, but
I think it's important, as we mentioned before we started recording. It's so important for you to tell your story and have these experiences on record, because there could be anybody listening today that's experienced something similar, or could go on to experience something similar, and it's so important that these people know that they aren't unique in their situations. They aren't alone in their feelings and their thoughts, and that there is a road to recovery. As you've just mentioned, you're still
Yep.
strong in your faith, or you've reconnected with your faith, despite, these horrible, evil things that have been done to you and your brother.
Yeah. And I know of the abuses were different for boys than girls, and I'm not aware enough to speak for the abuses that happened to the girls of my age there. But I'm not the only boy abused in that way. There, I know of at least 3 other boys, 2 of which from single mother households, that were severely abused so much that when they were 14 tried to run away.
Wow.
And
Okay.
and people who know the stories will know who I'm talking about, but it was that bad that I kind of got in line, learned to control myself, focused on studying, focused on learning, which is probably why I did pretty good in homeschooling. But not everybody had that out, like didn't enjoy books and didn't enjoy escaping into the world of fiction and the world of learning. Some of them just didn't have that, and their only out was to be rambunctious and to be rebellious and to push boundaries. And if what I got when I was 6 is a nightmare, they got it much worse for much longer periods of time than I did. And because they were 2 of the ones that I know were single moms, it wasn't the moms doing it, it was elders doing it. And I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that some of that was not done with the mother there.
It sounds protection. Like it's very isolated as well, as you mentioned. It's away from potential. What's the word? Temptation. So people that are suffering from alcoholism or substance abuse or gambling or anger. Well, I suppose not anger as much, but these physical things that you can get your hands on, it's away from all of those temptations and it's very isolated. So if you're in a single parent household with a parent who has uprooted her entire life to move her children to this place to better not only her life but her children's lives, you entrust then your lives into the hands of these people that are in these positions of power. So if they're telling you that your child needs to have a severe beating and the mother's like, well, I can't go anywhere, it's not like I can just well, maybe no. I'm a lot of these people, I'm guessing, wouldn't have access to a vehicle that they could just jump into and drive off, or a place to even go and stay.
Not until certain levels. And even if they did, the messaging that was coming from all the elders and everything else was, those are lost people. Why would you rely on your family when it was your family that caused all the issues for you to be a drug addict or this or that, or to get yourself in this situation anyways? Don't you recognize that salvation has come through this ministry, through David Kurshke, and you need to trust that what he's telling you to do is the right thing for your child? And it was, you have this, they're bartering what, if we could say that God did things in their lives, benefited their lives, got them out of drugs and alcohol and life controlling issues. They're bartering that as a way of controlling people in abusive ways. And that's probably the scariest thing, is that, like we talked about before, a lot of things on the surface seem good and motivated by good things, and will come across as, wow, not only is it trying to help troubled teens, but it also has a faith-based side of it, that they're still going to get college level courses. And they were college, maybe junior college, but college level courses in the Bible and in life issues. And they're going to be coached through how to maintain a job and all that. There was a lot of good, And they're using all of that to say, with all this good, this is also good. And they're redefining something that is actually really evil as a
Yep.
good. And you don't know, not knowing a life. I mean, my parents were kind of unique. We both of our grandparents are still together, so they didn't come from divorced homes.
Mm-hmm.
The only issue was the only real issue was my dad's anger. He was like, my relationship with him is extremely healthy now. He is an incredible father. He's an incredible grandfather. So even saying the story, like, how could a father do this to his child?
Mm-hmm.
When he came from uh, abuse, he didn't know any better. And
Yep.
when the elders said, well, it's not good that you beat your wife, but your kids are evil, let's beat them. What does he have to defend that and say, no, that's not right, other than his own conscience, which my mom used? She was like, no, that's not right. And they made her get out of the room
Mm-hmm.
and forced her away. So it's like that. They didn't have the tools to be able to defend and say, all right, this far, this is good. This isn't. No, stop. They didn't have the
Yeah.
power to do
Yeah.
that.
And it's also important to remember that this isn't just the second or third day that you've rocked up to this place and been introduced to these people. You know, this is somewhere you've lived for over a year,
Mm-hmm.
and you've slowly got to know all of the people that you're surrounded with. And your parents are in this program that they've become obviously very committed to, because they've decided to move your belongings from A to B.
Mm-hmm.
And so at this point, when it's these people that you trust that are telling your father that this is what needs to happen for things to work, for the program to be successful, for you to succeed in this, then, and that's another reason why, you know, and there's so many things that you've said that go towards these cult-like methods of control, with things like restricting what Disney films you can watch. So I'm guessing there is restrictions around all types of pop culture, magazines, television, videos,
It was
music.
highly encouraged to restrict. Now, my mom didn't need any encouragement with that. I mean, she was, not to give a shout out to a book, but she had already read Turmoil in the Toy Box, which is a horrible book about, here are the pop culture toys, and here's all the demons associated with them. And so she didn't need any encouragement to constrict what we got, but they definitely encouraged, you don't want to watch this, and you don't want to see this. And, you know, in some cases that may have been healthy. There's some things some subliminal things that now as an adult watching some Disney films, I'm going, oh, I never noticed that as a child. But as an adult, I'm going, I'm not too sure if that was something that was healthy for a kid to be aware of, or to subliminally be aware of. So I can see that there was some, once again, good motivations behind it. But then it became, you can't watch this news station, and you can't watch this because those local news stations were getting wise to us as a community, or a commune, or a cult, and we're starting to do more and more pieces that, nope, you can't watch the news, and you can't watch this, but it already been built in. Hey, you trusted us when we said don't watch this Disney film, and we let you as a parents watch it, and this is why we told you not to let your kids watch it, and you agreed with us. Well, we're telling you not to watch the news, or we're telling you not to listen to this, or we're telling you can't listen to this pastor or this preacher, and you need to only get your information from us, and we're the only ones that are interacting with the heavenlies, and everyone else is, if they're saved at all, are lesser Christians than you are. You could just, the control was all over the place.
And not just that, but you've got there's other information control with taking parts out of books and then telling you that, and another cult-like method that's being used is the fact that they're saying, don't contact your families. They're the ones that drove you here in the first place. So there's, trying to kind of create that insider, outsider way of life as well. So there's lots of things here that you're starting to mention here that points in the direction of a coercive model that exploits its members. And were there anything, like, we've mentioned some restrictions, but was there anything that you were required to like ask permission for? You know, you said there that you had to be at a certain level to have access to a vehicle. Was that common in the group?
Now I have limited experience when it comes to being a full-fledged adult there, but it was highly encouraged, recommended, and almost like used if you made a decision like purchasing a car, purchasing a home, purchasing land, investment, moving to the Houston area to be closer to your job. If you did not involve the eldership and anything went wrong in regards to the decisions that you made, you became a point of discussion in a public setting as you didn't listen to the elders or you didn't involve the elders in the decision, and you're reaping the benefits of your ill-advised decision. And so there was, and the same thing went with people who left or people who moved on or people that didn't leave. And then as time progressed, fewer and fewer people left in a positive way.
Right.
That they were, look, they're headed for a backslide. They're headed for a drug overdose. They're headed for, and the prayers. I don't know if Stefan mentioned this, but there's been other podcasts that talk about this. The prayers when somebody that would leave that was in more public, it was, Lord, do whatever it takes. If you have to break their legs, if you have to car crash them, whatever it needs, bring them back into the fold. Lord, we know that, sometimes there's a tough love, and they would pray what everyone else would recognize as a curse. Pray that over people that would leave. My parents, that's one of the reasons why it took so long. I left before my parents did, was that my parents were afraid. And that's why there's a lot of people that will much more limit what they're talking about at the center, is because they're afraid that curse is real. It's sickening.
It's quite scary when you put it that way, that's the type of mentality that came over the group, and you really helped to paint the picture there on how it moved away from sort of the true message and the helpful foundations to something that was clearly more for the personal gain of some of the members there than it was for the overall good of people who, had decided this program doesn't work for me, so I'm going to leave, or I'm not happy with my children being put in danger, so I'm going to take them away from here. And then it's my understanding from what Stefan said that there ended up being access to things that don't speak to rehabilitation, in terms of David Kirschke actually drinking quite a bit here and there. And
not just David Kirschke, the whole eldership.
And
it wasn't.
That doesn't make sense to me when you're in a place that, as we said before, is supposed to be away from those temptations. And then it's kind of another thing that sets the hierarchy apart from the people at the lower levels, so to speak, who are doing all the groundwork. And that
would be another highlighted progression over time, that, like, originally it was, how do we get these people that came into the program after life controlling issues back into society as well-functioning individuals? That progress from that to you can never leave, and everything that all the value that you bring as an individual must be fed back into the machine. And like I said, less and less people left positively at that point. The same thing progressed when it came from living a sober life, and over time became, well, yeah, we're still going to be, Straightway going into the schools telling people not to drink and not to be involved in drugs and because it's going to ruin your life, to that same group having drinking parties that the people of us that were honest weren't. We were on the outside because
Mm-hmm.
they knew we would be honest. Like, that's hypocritical. Like, how can you be telling someone not to drink and you're the 23-year-old, 25-year-old, 27-year-old leader of this teen group is getting you alcohol?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you're
Right.
going to the schools the next day hungover. Like, kids don't drink, it's really bad for you.
Yeah, and the thing is when I was on that team for a year, this was after I went through the program, I never saw that, but I was completely isolated from the group. Like, I was it's really strange. I was, I don't know, like, I don't know the details enough. You'd have to get somebody else on here to know everything else that was going on, but I've only heard rumors, so I can't say that they're true or
Mm-hmm.
not. But yeah, that was the point, was that hypocrisy grew later. It wasn't, I don't think that was original. And I think that it became more and more that they had become addicted as the leaders, and you can't hide that,
No.
right? And especially now when everybody has a camera on their phone, and that's what, you can look up some videos online, drunk tickle pastor or something like that. That's David Kursky. Um, you start seeing, you can't hide it anymore. And when my parents found out, because my parents were, I mean, my dad had a beer every once in a while before we came to uh,
Mm-hmm.
Lifeway or Straightway. Um, and he was sober, as far as I know, until they left. Um, but when my parents found out that there was alcohol in the leadership group, because my parents stayed on as part-time staff, volunteer staff, when they found out and they confronted them, they were just like, yeah, but that's law-based, and that's, we're not the ones that have that problem. But it was obvious from the drunk escapades and the things that were going on, um, that it was taken in excess.
Yes, yeah. And it went from maybe not being a problem that somebody had to potentially becoming a problem that somebody had in the middle of a place that offers rehabilitation programs for people who may suffer from alcoholism.
Yeah, and anybody that's been addicted, right? They can tell in the how people act that, so they're on that because they've experienced it. They know what it's like. And so
Yeah.
you had more and more students seeing that and calling it out,
Mm-hmm.
and one of two things would happen. They would be put on silent treatment if um, they were not amicable to keep the secret
Mm-hmm.
and protect the eldership, or they became part of the group. Like, they would get special privileges as favored students. And so you started seeing favoritism happening, and um, more control. And there's some nightmare stories of students that were put on, like, silent, like, they in silence for months at a time because they
Whoa.
had seen or heard or ran into one of the leaders drunk.
No, that's disgusting.
Absolutely disgusting.
Oh, that's like exactly what happened with you.
Hmm.
You're being punished for something that's completely out of your control.
Yep. Yep.
Something happens to you, or you've witnessed something that's not
Hmm.
your fault, and you're being punished for witnessing. That
Hmm.
is just,
Yep.
oh God, these types of stories, they really
Yep.
get my back up.
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, it's infuriating. Like, for me, um, I have no personal animus towards anyone there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's abuses going on that I want to stop,
Yes.
and that I'm not speaking to you or having posted this on part of my story on Facebook with specifically dedicated to trying to shut that place down. I'm not posting any of it because of my personal bitterness and anger towards the leadership or eldership or people there that were involved.
Mm-hmm.
It's that I don't want anyone else to endure that abuse.
Of course.
It even got to the point where when it was 2012, 2013, when I really rededicated my life to actually walking out my faith, that I was, in prayer, and God, I don't know how much faith is involved in your audience. So this may, if you want to edit this later, that's fine. But there was a moment in time in prayer that I reached a point where I hit a wall in my understanding of my faith.
Mm-hmm.
And what came back was, you're bitter. And that bitterness towards the whole group, your bitterness is preventing you from seeing your faith clearly. And so I went and asked David Kirschke's forgiveness for being bitter against him. And I didn't ask his forgiveness for his sake. I asked his forgiveness for my sake. So, leaving the church that I left a little early from the church that I was involved in and been involved in teaching and everything, and went to one of their church services, and afterwards got a hold of David and asked his forgiveness for being bitter for what I viewed as abuses in my childhood and the mistreatment of my family, because I was not the only one mistreated. My mom was berated by multiple people, including Stefan's dad, for calling them out on their hypocrisy. So I asked his forgiveness for being bitter, and he fed me a huge line of, oh, things have changed, and I'm, people are holding things against me, that I'm no longer that way, and things like that, and it was a load of BS. But for me, letting that go has been a turning point in my life, that I can see clearly enough to go, all right, this person is speaking out of bitterness towards the abuses that they've had, and this person is speaking from trying to heal. And that's where I'm at. I'm like, I want to get to the point where I'm healed. I want to help people that have gone through abuses there or at other places like it and have them healed. And I want to shut down places, not out of anger, bitterness, or vengefulness, but out of, there's people that don't know any better, sheep that are being beaten by shepherds. And that is not okay.
Especially because there doesn't seem to be, I mean, just going back to the troubled teen industry and those programs, since Paris Hilton brought her documentary out, and there's been a lot of stuff around the Breaking Code Silence movement, there is finally some movement in the court of law that is bringing in policies and procedures and reform to potentially stop the abuse of further teenagers. And that's come from people speaking out about their situations. And this wouldn't have happened if people didn't sit down and go on record and essentially whistleblow on what had happened to them. And that's why it's important that we're having this conversation today. And obviously, some parts of it have been difficult for you to speak about and to relive, which is completely understandable. And probably expected as well. But without these stories, no matter what platform they're on, whether it's a blog or a Facebook post or a forum or a magazine or newspaper article or a podcast, if these stories don't come out, there's never going to be that opportunity for people to be held accountable. So when you're talking about not wanting to do it out of bitterness, I think that's coming across quite authentically to myself and probably the listeners, that actually you're just trying to prevent further abuse of children, single parents, like your father, who were just completely misguided, misled, exploited themselves as well. So it's I think it's good, and I just hope that with these encounters that I have with people like yourself that come and talk so bravely and openly about their experiences, that there isn't too much damage when we say goodbye today and you go away and reflect on everything, because that's always something that's a worry for me, is that you'll go away and then you're kind of left with your own thoughts and kind of reeling after these conversations, and then you're like, oh my goodness, all these things happen. So that's always
I
something that
I don't
it's
think you need to be concerned with me on that. I appreciate the sentiment. I've I've went through the hell of trying to heal,
Mhm.
kind of alone, and I felt really bad. I've actually apologized to a large group of friends that had left there, that they fell within the wound that place created in me, and so
Mhm.
I isolated myself from all of them. And there was a lot of good people that left that I know they didn't deserve my rejection. I didn't know how else to process it, but I've processed most of that, and like I said, I'm not I'm not bitter anymore. I'm not angry at what I went through. Um, what angers me is that there's still people there. There's still people that are um, people that I loved, that were part of what we, because you're a family there, um, that are still there, that are, they think their salvation is tied to what David Kurshke offers. They still are faithful even with all the twisted hell and lies that they have been exposed. They don't know life as good as
Mhm.
they have it there,
Yeah.
because the only life that they have of was in a homeless shelter with a needle stuck in their arm. And so the this is the best life they've ever lived as an adult. And so they're still tying all that and worshiping this man, David Kurshke, instead of recognizing that it was a step along the way to a life free from those addictions,
Yeah.
and that they are supposed to mature beyond that.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
supposed to grow beyond that. And so this is not just a call to people that may be in the program or in those situations at um, things like this, but this is also a call to people that are dedicating their lives thanklessly to men who are abusing their power.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's what this is going, don't, there is a life of great blessing and and ability, and you can stand on your own 2 feet. You are able to withstand the temptation now. Be strong, get out from under that abuse, because the longer you stay in it, the easier it is for that to continue. And
Yeah.
that's what happened with my family until it was just too much, and my
Mhm.
parents left. And I
Mhm.
and I that's my heart cry. That's my heart call. And no, I don't think that I'm going to go away from this conversation going, "Oh, I've got a lot more to think about," or more scars were opened up. No, they have been dealt with. I wouldn't have talked with you if I hadn't dealt with a lot of these
Mhm.
beforehand.
Mhm. Mhm. And it's genuinely people such as yourself that I take the opportunity to speak to, because it feels like there is less chance of that potentially happening with somebody who, you know, talks about how they've managed to recover or heal from their experiences and reflect. Um and you mentioned that your parents did end up leaving, but before
Hmm.
that happens, you joined the Navy. So I'm just
Hmm.
curious,
Yeah.
why that happened, how that happened, what position you held, what was it like while you were there? And then you're not in
Okay.
the Navy now. So how did you
No.
leave?
Okay. Well, when I was about, so I graduated the program. Um, it was my senior year, so that was practically my senior year. Homeschooling was the program. I had odd jobs, worked wait as a waiter in multiple restaurants. Kind of went through a rebellious phase. My parents almost kicked me out of the house because I was drinking and smoking, and kind of rejected the whole faith thing then. Still considered myself a Christian, but definitely wasn't walking anything of my faith at that point. Um, Bought some land, made it through, got my associate's degree, and realized I couldn't continue my education on my own. There was no way I could afford it. My parents uh, weren't in the financial situation to actually help me with that.
Mm-hmm.
So finished my associate's degree, joined the Navy because of the education that I could get in what they call the nuke program. I scored in the top 4% on the ASVAB when I took it. And so the only option the Navy gave me was to become a nuclear operator on their power plants. So that was a grueling 2 years of it's a 4-year nuclear engineering degree in 18 to 20 months. And so I became a lab technician for a nuclear power plant, volunteered for the submarine force, spent 4 years on a submarine. It was the second oldest submarine still in operation.
Wow.
Hated it because the leadership of the captains were good. The XOs were really good. It was the department, the engineering department I was a part of, that was really bad. And I could have made a life in the military, but those first 4 years on a boat that made many other, 14-year and 20-year sailors depressed to the point where they were removed from their position. It was that bad that chiefs, E7s and E6s that had spent their life 14 years in the military, went sad. And you're not allowed to be on antidepressants on a submarine, so they actually lose their position if they go on antidepressants.
Oh gosh.
That's how bad the leadership was there. And I saw that, and that was my next step, was to be in leadership. And I was like, I can't compromise my character to do that.
No.
And there was some other personal issues that were really, really going on. That was almost went through a divorce. We didn't get a divorce, and that was before we had kids, and now we have 4 kids, so we're happily married. That I was just like, that although I could make a career out of the Navy, I'd be a career bachelor, and I couldn't see myself doing that. So I got out of the Navy, and was self-employed for a little while and got into the oil industry. So there was a lot of things that I learned in the nuclear industry that was very conducive to working in the oil industry.
Nice.
So I've been working in a lab since 2012 when I got out of the Navy. All chemistry-based, physical chemistry and water chemistry and oil chemistry, a bunch of chemistry stuff. So, and now I work for Chevron as a lab tech. So I love it. I love working in the labs. It's a lot of fun.
That's amazing. That's so good. That's such an interesting journey. It sounds like you've gone from finding something you're really good at, but realizing that staying in that job would mean to compromise who you are, to kind of still being able to do stuff you really enjoy, but you just get to leave it all at the door when you get and then just come home, and that's it. Yep.
And man, I could, not that this needs to be on public, this may be something past the recording, but Chevron has a great company to work for, and their leadership is probably one of the best I've ever worked for.
Wow.
So, and I've only been working for them for 1.5 years, and incredible. So I'm very happy where I'm at. I'm very happy with the work that I'm doing and the direction of the company. So I'm happy in regards to all that. And this discussion and what I'm concerned in is definitely something that is one more thing to take off of my shoulders and go, all right, it's out there. Hopefully there's enough people that get behind it to just shut down David Kirschke's influence when it comes to Straightway, Lifeway.
Yeah, I mean, is he still alive?
Oh yeah.
And he's
still the head pastor.
It's weird.
He's not heading it. His daughter is heading it.
Oh, his daughter is now. Okay, interesting. Because I saw the mutual friend that connected us to one another sent me a video of them advertising the place the other day.
I saw it,
and it looked genuinely like, wow, this looks like somewhere that could help people. It was like,
they're well practiced at it. They got 40 years.
Yeah,
they have 40 years of practice.
I was watching it and I was seeing like young people who were like, wow, this place really helped me. This is my testimony to Restoration City and why it will work for you. And I was like,
if
Wow,
they're
you just would not know that underneath
Mhm.
the surface all these things have happened or are happening. You just wouldn't
No.
know.
And I think that if when they're most of the people that they do interviews like this, because this is not the first time they've done a video like this, but most of the time when they're reaching out, there's a select few people that they will actually reach out to do that interview with, or those
Right.
students, and they're the students that have not had much disciplinary action, or that they have something over those students. And I've seen that multiple times, that's how they would do that. The other side of it is you don't start seeing the underbelly of that until
Mm-hmm.
you're in the final stages of the program, where you're given some independence, like, being able to go out and have a job somewhere outside, that you might run into a staff member that's not within the confines of the their service and their volunteer leadership at the location. And so you might actually run into them when they're just leaving the bar, or you might actually run into them
Yeah.
when they're not in the best they don't have the best mask on. And so that's usually where they're getting it, is people that have made it through most of the program, but before they start seeing real world. And so their perspective is naive, and at that moment they are flying high. They've 12 months sober. They haven't had a relapse. They're just about to start working in the real world. Everything is daisies and roses, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
they're good to go, and they're on a high. Like, look, I learned so much about my faith. I'm a Christian now, and all these answers are in my pockets, and I have all the tools, and they're really excited. You don't hear the person that's gone through the program 4 times. You don't hear from the person that has unless it's a staff member that is really well versed, uh, and is holding the lie, or holding the line of the lie that's going on, and
Mm-hmm.
holding that
Mm-hmm.
underbelly, which uh, should I say their names? Well, yeah. Pete Esposito and Becky Kershke, those are people that are well versed and are capable of sounding perfect
That's
in
the
their
carrot. That's the
expression.
charism, isn't it? That's the
Hmm.
charismatic leader
Yep.
coming forward there.
Well, I mean, both Pete Esposito has been a coach for so many years, so that ability to um, uh, project a positive movement forward uh, is part of his job, and so that it's just a switch to turn it over to this thing that I am benefiting from and being empowered at. It's really sickening when you know the stories of what's gone on behind the scenes, and
Mm-hmm.
going, this person should not be the face of this place anymore. And I- you know if I get some hell from using their names, they're part of the problem. They're not a part of the solution. They're the ones that are carrying the flag, but they're still doing David's bidding.
And I mean, I guess the last question that I have before we finish
Hmm.
today, which I think we might have gone over, but I'm sure that there's some more to add, is what advice do you have for others who may be in similar situations or may have experienced similar things, who are
Okay.
looking to move forward or move away from their coercive group?
Um, I understand that with a lot of people that might find themselves in this situation, their family life, their extended family, the family that's not there, may not always be the healthiest family. But if you do have a family that loves you, tell them. Do whatever it takes to tell them. Now, you may be in a place that doesn't allow you to write a letter without someone reading it, which was what it was at Straightway, or be on a phone call with family without someone over your listening in. Do whatever it takes to let your family know, because your family will do something about it. I think that seems to be the best advice I can give, if you're in it and you see this corruption and you see this abuse and you've been abused in this situation, is get your family involved on the outside. Do whatever you can to do to connect with them. Another one is recognize if your conscience is telling you what you're enduring is wrong and evil, listen to it. Right? I mean, both my mom and my dad in the abuse that I went through knew what their consciences were telling them, but didn't trust their conscience over the words of the elders that were doing that. Trust. If you feel sick about it, listen to it and do something about it. They're not as powerful as they think they are. You give them power. It's your loyalty to whatever they say that makes them powerful. If you are your own independent thinker and you're listening to your conscience going, this is not right, you can take away that power from them. Do that. For people that have family members that they think might be in a cult, love them. Tell them that you're there for them. Reach out to them. Be incessant with your reaching out to them and expressing that you love them, because it may take a little while to warm up. It may take a little while to reach out and get the courage enough to tell you, but be that ally. That would be the advice that I'd give for the various different people that might be listening. I don't know.
I think that's great. I mean, I keep referring back to this, and I think that it's allowed. But I spoke to cult expert Janja Lalich on the podcast a few months ago, and she said that the most important thing when a family or friend joins a cult or coercive group is to keep the lines of communication open, to let that person know that you're always there for them, even if you've tried every which way possible to tell them that the group that they're a part of isn't good for them and they're just not listening to you. The most important thing that you can do is keep that line of communication open. And I feel like that kind of echoes what you've said there, by just remain an ally to that person. Don't shut them out and say, well, you're not listening to me, I've tried everything, so I'm going to walk away. Be there for that person when hopefully everything comes tumbling down, and you're there to help pick up the pieces. And all we can do is take a step back and hope that moment happens, and
be ready for it.
I've heard that coming out of the fog, or waking up, or however people want to describe this moment, where this kind of the veil is lifted and they realize that all those red flags and all those times they felt sick were leading them to have this kind of moment of realization, even though that in itself is terrifying and difficult and heartbreaking, and almost it's almost like you have to mourn then. You have to mourn all this time that you've lost to this group.
Oh man. That is such a, keep going, because this right here is exactly some of the things that I went through and my parents went through. This place of mourning and shame, that when you realize that you've been in a part of something that's that wrong, you have a choice of going, oh, I have to repent, change from, recognize that I was a part of this problem for however many years it could be. And some people can't accept that they were that naive for that long. And
it's okay to grieve. It's okay to grieve and to mourn that time. I can't remember what the terminology is, but it's when you've put money or time into something and you're afraid to let it go because you've invested.
You're afraid of loss.
Everybody's going to be shouting the phrase at me now, because I have it has been mentioned on the show, but it's that fear of, well, I've put years into this, what am I supposed to do if I just walk away?
That was my message to the people that were like family to me that are still there, is that when they've been there for 35 years, because they were there before we were there, a part of the abuse, being people that did abuse other people and going, well, it had to have been for the right reasons. You get to that point where if you realize that, you either shut down and become a drone of someone else's thoughts, which is, I think, is what a lot of them have done, or you reject it all. And that place is probably was the most difficult thing. Is like my family spent was the 89 to 2006, 2007, or no, I think 2008 was when my parents left. That's 20 something years, almost 20 something years of invested time at this place where they volunteered, and it was difficult. And I was the one that like told my parents, like, stop worrying about getting their blessing. That place is evil. Get out. And it was that my parents are doing great now.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that choice to accept the loss, whatever that loss was, because continuing in that loss, you're cutting up your soul. And it's, I hope that people that are there, that are still there, that have been there for 30 some odd years,
Yeah,
have some soul left.
Well, hopefully. I mean, all you can do is add to the information that can be put out there online. Mm-hmm. And then maybe one day somebody will access the internet and have a little type into Google, and the name Straightway or Restoration City or something will pop up, and they'll read something and think, oh my goodness, that's how the world sees us. And it's not just people like me on the outside saying they look like they could be a cult. It's people who have left that are testifying to these things that are happening. So I just, all that's left to say really is thank you so much, Troy, for coming here today, for sharing your story, for being just so humble and authentic in the way that you've presented yourself today, and come here to give us all the information and experiences you've had. I just really appreciate being able to sit here and have these candid conversations with people about things that are difficult and delicate, but as we said before, important to share with the world. So thank you so much. And I really hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, Troy.
Thank you very much for giving us a platform to actually speak. This is, man, I hope more people listen. So thank you very much for what you're offering and the opportunity that you've given me to speak. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. It's
absolutely my privilege, Troy. Thank you very much. I'll speak to you soon.
Yes.
Thanks. Bye. That is the end of this week's episode. If you'd like to get in touch, then please do so by emailing me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, and this has been the Cult Vault.